right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine, and Coavera, formerly Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Warren Kornblum, who is up in Toronto, Canada. How you doing, Warren?
I'm good. Thank you. How are things in San Diego? We're getting a little bit of actually just north of Toronto, but we're getting a little bit of forest fires, kind of gray skies over us. But it's all good. Can't complain.
Yeah, no, thankfully there's no wildfires yet, so that's always good. If we can get through this period. And Warren, you're the founder and CEO of Shadow Branding. And you previously served as a global chief marketing officer of Toys R Us and chief marketing officer of Certis Simmons Bedding. And now through your Share of Heart philosophy and new book, Notes from the Brand Stand. Love that title. That's a great one. Great title.
Thank you.
You help brands build emotional connections that create lasting customer loyalty. And for our younger viewers and listeners who may not remember Toys R Us at its peak, but if you had a kid, you lived in Toys R Us. You lived in Toys R Us, and it was just an amazing, amazing place. So we're going to talk today about why customers remember some brands forever and not others. And Warren, even today, I think it's even more so. You have endless choice. You have algorithmic noise, constant disruption. You have brands blow up on, say, TikTok, and then they're I know with my son, some clothing brand will be huge for 6 months and then it's gone and something else is. So, I mean, why do some brands have longevity and are able to stay for decades while some of them, like the ones they fade away after a short amount of time or even a nanosecond now?
Well, I think John, the first thing I would say is that I clearly differentiate in my mind between transaction and affinity or loyalty.
Right.
And I think that that's the first thing. I mean, when you talk about trendy brands, they tend to be much more transaction oriented. I need the latest pair of jeans or the latest t-shirt or the latest, whatever. Whereas brands that earn share of heart and have that longevity, they've been around for a while and they become almost part of your family, almost like your circle of friends. And I really do try and get it down to that level. It's because in my mind, as a marketing person for my entire life, I've always believed that I have to get out of my own skin. The most important person to me as a marketing practitioner, and I think to all marketing practitioners, is the customer.
Yeah.
Be that however they find you, whether it's online or whether it's in a store or whether it's any way they find you, because it's about how they want to transact and what they want. And then I think whether you're a sole practitioner or whether you're running a multi-billion-dollar company, you have to realize that the experience is all in the customer's head, right? And I think that finding ways to first of all, meet, fulfill, and then exceed their aspirations and how they want to shop is the key. And if it's a one and done, either in terms of the purchase, the transaction, or the philosophy and the purpose of the business is much more about we're just going to get it now and be gone. You're not going to build share of heart there. If it's something where you want to be part of the family, and you want to be the go-to brand, no matter what share of heart almost gets you forgiveness. You don't have to be the lowest price every time. You don't have to be the most, the last ad. It's some brands that just transcend those day-to-day transactions and become a part of the way you live.
Yeah. So, so you developed the idea of share of heart, as you can see on your hat there.
That's very classic commercial, I know.
That's great. So define it for me, and also, winning emotional loyalty. I mean, I think that's really what you're after at the end of the day. How do you get there, and how does that differ, and how is that more important than brand awareness?
Well, in classic marketing, as you know, I'm sure. I mean, the way they used to teach, I don't know if they still do, but it was share of mind. So think of me. Top of mind. If you got a little bit better, it was think of me first. And obviously, all of us in the business world are measured on share of wallet. So you give me more business than you're giving the person who does the same thing as me. So, share of mind, top of mind, share of wallet. And at a very early stage of my career, I said, I think if I could find a way to get consumers, not everybody, but the people I'm trying to do business with, or my brand is trying to do business with, to not only think of me first and give me a transaction, but like me, um, and have a connection with me, then you sort of go way beyond any of those other shares, because there's a lot of obligation attached to that, because it's almost like a good friend. When a good friend disappoints you, you get really upset with them.
Mhm.
When a brand that you feel share a part towards does something wrong, you have to earn it every single day. And I think, to answer your question about how do they do it, I think it starts with, and I don't want to throw a lot of fancy terms that everybody uses, but like purpose. But it is. I mean, what does the brand stand for? Which is where the name of the book came from. So,
Mhm.
what's the DNA of the brand? What is it? What's its purpose? What's its promise? And then, most importantly, the way it's delivered has to be from the CEO down to the sales clerk, or the technical person online, to the customer service people. There has to be just a common sense of purpose and an absolute passion for the customer. And when
Yeah.
that happens, then people feel important, they feel you're relevant to them, and they want to do business with you. And that's sort of, it won't be, was it the last ad I saw, or was it cheapest price I saw? These are the people I trust and I believe in. That's
Yeah.
share.
So, what did you do at Toys R Us? Because I mean that's such it's such a great such a great brand, and and like I said, it was such a great place to go to, and it was, let's face it, you kind of looked forward to going there. I did anyway, although it meant that I would come out like with my wallet a little lighter, that's for sure, and my son with a load of stuff that he didn't need. But despite all of that, I mean, so how did you build that kind of that kind of emotional, or that attachment for families and kids and everything?
Well, but first of all, I can't absolutely take credit for that. A gentleman named Charles Lazarus, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, founded Toys R Us 50 years before I
Mm.
got there. And I think part of it is what Toys R Us is all about. I mean, it was about the joy of childhood, right? It's toys,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
It's not rocket science. And I think but to your point, when I got there, because I had been in the advertising business my entire career up until that point, it was the first time in my vernacular that I had gone from being on the service side ad agency to being
Mhm.
a client, right?
Right.
And I remember walking in and saying, and the reason that the board of directors, it was then a public company, decided to change a fair amount of the senior management team was, Amazon had gotten in the toy business, Walmart
Yeah.
was getting in the toy business. These juggernauts were getting into an area that was never really challenged in many of those 50 years I spoke about.
Mhm.
And the internet was coming on big time too. Um, so when I got there, I said, well, I have to figure out this this client thing. Obviously, I've had a lot of clients in my career, but never been one. And the first thing I realized, and again, I think sometimes it's just recognizing the customer and giving them what they want. So the first thing was, there was the iconic song, "I Don't Want to Grow Up, I'm a Toys R Us Kid," that we can probably sing right now together. That had, for some reason or other, some really smart marketing person said, yeah, you know what, it's kind of old, we need something new. Yeah, but you know what? Before then, and 20 years later, because I left in 2006, you're hard pressed to find someone who can't at least hum that song, maybe
Yeah.
poorly, but right. And then the other one was Jeffrey the Giraffe. They had
Yes.
stopped using it, and Jeffrey the Giraffe was like iconic. Now, he had been a cartoon two-dimensional character, so I said, you know what? I was a second, arguably third generation Toys R Us kid. I knew the song. I knew Jeffrey the Giraffe. I said, let's first of all, let's just give them back what they love about the
Mhm.
brand. So, I mean, that was, I think, the first step. Then another step along the way was, we felt that the brand needed to be reinvigorated. So that manifested itself in a lot of things, but probably the highest profile one was the Times Square Toys R Us store,
Mhm.
which we built, and it later became the top family tourist attraction in New York for many years.
Mhm.
It was a ridiculous, it cost us a fortune to build that store, but what it did
That was
was, it
great.
was like, holy mackerel! I mean,
Oh.
this brand's alive, and it's a celebration of kids and families. And then the last thing I would say, John, in that, there's a million of them, but the last really telling one was that in 1999, which is when I joined, um, getting in the customer's skin is something that I'll come back to all the time, because it's something I totally believe. It's not about me; it's about the person
Mhm.
I'm trying to do business with. And our customer was clearly, primary customer was mom with kids.
Mhm.
Yes, you and I as dads and all that were part of it, but the primary customer was a mom with kids, and all of us were guys with ties. And I quickly said, again, I'm the marketing guy. I have to have an ability to
Yeah.
know it's not about me, it's about my customer.
Yeah.
But as much as I can study a mom with kids, I'm never going to be one.
Mhm.
And so I think that kind of flipping it around and saying, we obviously need people who get it. And then the other thing was, we didn't need research surveys. Let's get kids in and let them play with toys.
Yeah.
And you quickly realize, and this as a dad, it's not necessary. I mean, everybody wants to be the hero who gets a child like the rock star Christmas present or birthday present or
Mhm.
whatever. It's not necessarily always about the money you spend on it or the packaging. There's just something that the child goes to and just wants to play with it. And I think even older children. I mean, so it became focus on the customer and do everything we can to say you're welcome. Come into us, whether it's online, in store. We weren't perfect by any stretch, and we had a huge advantage that toys and Toys R Us into itself was had a share of people's heart because of what we did.
Mhm.
But that was it. I think give the brand to the customer. That's the
Yeah,
biggest advice.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And for anybody who missed out on that store, I mean, it had a Ferris wheel in the middle, for goodness sake. It was
Absolutely.
fantastic.
I
It
was
was
talking. I was talking to someone the other day. I swear to God, in a rental car company, getting
Mhm.
my car when I came to Toronto because I live in Florida and
Yeah.
I'm Canadian. I come here for the summers, and the guy had said to me, I don't know if someone set me up or not, but he said, I read your book. This is in the rental car company. And he
Mhm.
said, I got engaged on the Ferris wheel in Toys R Us. I said, oh my God, do you have a
No
picture,
way.
please? I said, I need a picture of that. And he said, actually, he hasn't sent it to me yet. But so that, I mean, yeah, it was just a different
I
place and
was
a different
well,
experience.
yeah, it was the Ferris wheel, and then at the time you always had Spider-Man and Iron Man and all
Yeah.
those people
And
wandering around the
A Barbie
store.
house, Barbie
Yeah.
house in the store. And
And at the
yeah,
time,
yeah.
when I went there with my son a couple of times, but he totally believed they were the real Iron Man and Spider-Man, and he just thought Toys R Us were the greatest in the world because they, hung out there. But tell me about it. A part of it is the trust part, and I feel that that is something that today has become very difficult because there's so much noise or whatever. Something that really needs focus. So how do you build that trust throughout, with all the noise and distractions out there?
Well, the simplest and probably most trite thing I could say, if I believe it in my soul, is that old expression about you say what you do and do what you say.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that's where so many brands fall short. Is it's people always talk about, well, I have to have a purpose statement or a mission
Yes.
statement. I mean, and one of the things in my advisory role with shadow branding is that I the first time when I'm called in, and even if it's not a client, when you go to a doctor's office, they always have there's a mission statement. It's on the
Mhm.
wall, it's on a shelf, it's on. And one of the things that I always do as a litmus test is I'll always say, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to talk to a bunch of people, and I'll say, so I saw you have a mission statement and or a purpose statement, and then go, yeah. And one of three things happens. One, and I'm not talking about the receptionist who's staring at the sign. I'm talking about walking around the organization or into the store. And one is they'll recite it verbatim,
Yep.
but just like robotically. And I'm like, okay, fine. So you studied it. Or the second option is they'll look at you and say, we do.
Yeah.
That's equally troubling. And then the third one, which I love, is when people can kind of they don't say it the way necessarily it was written or hit every single point, like the Ten Commandments, but
Mhm.
they passionately can tell you what the purpose of the business is and what the business stands for, and they do it in their own way, which tells me that they embrace it. They're where they should be, and they're probably going to do that when they're dealing with customers.
Mhm.
So I think that that having a brand having a purpose or a business having a purpose is important because you have to have a stand,
Sure.
built from the brand stand. Then I think inherent in that is telling people what you do, which is kind of the brand promise.
Mm-hmm.
But those are words and
Yep.
concepts where I think it separates itself is in the delivery of them, is being what you say, doing what you say, and most importantly, working very hard every single day to earn trust. And
Yeah.
then if you get really good, trust then becomes belief. And when people believe in you, then it's a lot easier to stay with them.
And let's face it, to achieve that, then you have to have the internal culture aligned with the brand values, right? Because how often
100%.
how often have you come across that where, yeah, they have a vision statement, or they have this on their website, or they have these values, or they say this, they say, oh, customer centric, because let's face it, everybody has that on that
Yeah,
bumper
yeah.
sticker up there until you engage with them, and then you go, not so customer centric, really. So, I mean, it's so obvious to people when they engage with the brand if there's a misalignment.
And then they're very unforgiving when they are because
Yeah,
part of earning share of heart is like a good friend. We said earlier, it's like a good friend. If they get you, I was going to say the P word, but I'm not saying that.
sure.
If they upset you because you hold them to a higher standard, and the same thing goes with a brand. So I think, John, to answer your question, from my perspective, um, in troubled times when there's an issue, those are the times where you really can cement the relationship or completely destroy it, right?
Mhm.
And I think, like something is on this. I mean, when people have an issue, it's important to them. And I
Yeah.
understand efficiency and effectiveness and all that kind of stuff, but how many times I wish I had 10 cents for every time I've been sitting on my phone going, representative, 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 and
Mhm.
now that's not, yeah, it was efficient. You got me through and I'm talking to a machine, but
Yeah.
machines don't have empathy. And there's a balance between efficiency and algorithm, and AI is here to stay. And I think every
Yeah.
company needs to be fluent in it, not
Mhm.
necessarily expert, but fluent. But on the other side, there's got to be a trigger point where human touch comes
Yeah.
into it.
Absolutely.
Because, as I said, machines aren't empathetic.
Yeah.
With human beings, we are.
Yeah. No, I spend a lot of time shouting at my phone too
We all do, I
for
think.
customer service, customer representative, and then
Yeah.
I start throwing in some extra words, which we won't say here, and
Well,
doesn't
and
help
then
me.
the one I had one the other day, you get a kick out of it. It was like, yeah, same thing, representative, customer service, customer representative, and then finally the machine voice said, "Oh, you'd like to speak to an applicant."
An
I'm like,
advocate.
okay,
An
call him what you
advocate.
want. Yeah, call him what you want. But yes, I want to talk to a human. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very funny. Um, so, I mean, if you're a small brand, say, right, and you're coming into the market, you can't outspend the bigger brands, on marketing, all of that. What are some good strategies to adopt if you're a small, scrappy up and comer?
Well, I'm a big believer that the most important part of communicating, and I've always believed this, is not what I'm doing now, and that's kind of inherent to
Mhm.
what we're doing. But
Mhm.
it's not the talking part; it's the listening. And I think that if you're going into business, be it taking over, walking into a large environment like I did within the Toys R Us, or servicing these days,
Mhm.
or you're opening a small shop on your own, you must have and you should have a sense of who it is you're dealing with, who the customer is, the potential customer in that case. And I think that seeing them, understanding them, really taking it down to the customer and what they're looking for and why they should do it with you, and then delivering on that promise is absolutely fundamental. And I don't think it's about the size. Yeah, you're not going to be able to blast out, whatever. In the old days of
Mhm.
flyers and FSIs, you're not going to have 10 million flyers out there. But word of mouth to me is the most powerful medium
Yeah.
there is. And I
Mhm.
think finding a way to permeate someone's consideration set so that they think of you and consider you when they're in that purchase cycle of what you do, is really important. How you greet them, how you treat them, how you're there for them. Not necessarily being the cheapest, but being the fairest.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, I always remember one of the things a professor of mine once said that has stuck with me for a long time is value isn't necessarily about how little you pay. It's about what you get for what you pay.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that, that's, yes, price is in there for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also about all the other stuff that makes you feel good about purchasing for someone.
Yeah, because normally, I mean, even if you buy something that maybe is a little pricey or whatever, but if it turns out to be what you wanted and maybe a little more, and maybe the experience with the brand and with everything added a little more, you suddenly it becomes in your mind like that, as you said, well, it's a fair price. Yeah, it's not cheap, but look what you get.
Right, right, yeah, and I think that's therein also comes brand loyalty, right? I mean, it's I'm not going to question the purchase. I'm not going to be looking over my shoulder thinking
Hmm.
they're taking advantage of me. I
Hmm.
feel comfortable in the way that they do business, and I've grown to appreciate them, trust them, like them, and yeah, I'm not going to splitting hairs isn't the right way to put it, but I'm not going to overpay, but I trust them. I think part of that's also that I trust the brand or the store or the purveyor that they're not going to make me overpay, that they're going to give
Right.
me the reasonable value and treat me right.
Hmm. And so and one of the things like as we come to the end of this is I think a really key takeaway for people is like, yes, AI, yes, all of these other things and all the, we're all love it, use it and all of that. But I think if you're going to have if you're a lot of times if you're going to have a brand stick, the authenticity comes from the human experience, and not and the human experience on the part of the buyer and part of the company and the vendor. It's that human experience, I think. And what do you think?
I completely agree with you. And even as I said, it's always a tough conversation to have because I get that large customer service organizations, large phone centers, all that, they need efficiency. They can't have like 97 million people answering phone calls. I get that. But I think when from the leadership down and from the touch point of the consumer up, when everybody is aligned that this is how we treat people,
Hmm.
and our customers are the most important thing in our whole system, then I think a different perspective comes along. So, I had a CEO say to me, "Well, do you really think that I can have enough customer service people to handle all the volume of calls we get or emails?" And I went, "I don't know, I get that. But somewhere in there should be a trigger point that says, okay, this person
Yeah.
is really, is a customer, they're frustrated. How do I help them?" And as I said earlier, machines, no matter how sophisticated they are, they don't have human
Yeah.
empathy. They're a machine. It's
Yeah.
like if this, then that, bye bye. It's like,
Yeah, I had an experience the other day actually. I could tell you where it was when I got through to a live person, right? And this was an issue, and I was not in the greatest of moods because of what was going on or whatever. But I got through to a live person, and I started telling them what the issue was, and the first thing they said to me was like, "I'm so sorry to hear that. That's no good. We're going to have to fix that." And it completely disarmed, completely changed the whole thing because I'm used. Because the crazy thing, Warren, is we're not used to that kind of service anymore. We're not used to that kind of even that initial authentic human reaction.
yeah, no, you're right. And you know what? I think that sometimes, I think AI and technology is
No,
phenomenally
of course.
enabling,
Mhm.
phenomenally enabling, but it doesn't build the connection. What it does is it sets the landscape, right? It tells you, whatever the amount of algorithms and history and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't give you the answer. One of the things I used to always like saying is that research is a really valuable tool, but it's no substitute for sound human judgment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing in what you're saying. That it's like it could be an algorithm that says to me, "Hey, thanks for being a card member for 5 years." All right, but it made
Mhm.
me feel good that it acknowledged me, as opposed to
Yeah.
like you're just a number, right?
Yeah.
And I think it starts at the top, be that a sole entrepreneur or someone running a multi-billion-dollar company. It starts with that commitment to the customer, and then hopefully you're smart enough to have a system in place and a team in place that are motivated, sort of back to those, that purpose statement or mission statement, that they really do embrace it. The third
Mhm.
example, and that you have created a system where you empower the people who believe in what you're doing to actually fulfill that promise to the customer. And that, I think, is where a lot of organizations fail, is that they say it, but they don't do it. And it's not necessarily their people's fault. They may not be empowered.
No, and I think that's the problem, is a lot of times they're not empowered, because it makes such a difference. I mean, it's even like, like some of the airlines who will allow their cabin crew like $50 allowance for if there's an issue or something, or if there's a special thing, or they want to reward somebody. Like like somebody I heard recently, they were commenting on how nice the red wine was, and where was it from? And they were asking it. And as they left the plane, the cabin crew member presented them with a bottle and said, "Why didn't you take this with you?" I mean, and think of the experience, that because that person was telling me about it on a podcast, right? So look how far that went, just on the empowerment that cabin crew member was empowered to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And to make, you're one of 300 or whatever people on a plane, and one of tens of thousands and millions of people who are part of that program. But yeah, that one person, or sometimes it's like, using that, it's the captain coming out and holding the microphone in front of the cabin door and saying, "Hey, and talking, and just being a person as opposed to a pre-program." So I think we live in a world where so much is automated, and should be. I'm not anti-automation, but humanity and interpersonal skills, even if it's at a distance, right? Like that CEO who's sitting there saying, "I'm going to allow my people to do that." I remember, not to bore you with this bold story, but when I was in another company I was at, was called Rooms to Go, which is a kind of like you're in San Diego, so it's kind of like a living spaces kind of retailer. Very successful in the Southeast. And when I first got there, one of the things that I found out that I never knew, they had a vast call center, and the CEO was brilliant. He was a real customer service guy. But when I talked to the head of the call center, I said, "So, like, how do you guys do things, and what do you measure on?" And her answer to me was, "Well, we're counterintuitive to almost every other call center you'll ever talk to." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Most are measured in speed of dealing with a call." Well, guess what? If you're worried about getting me off the phone, you're probably not going to have that experience you talked about, right? And I think that's you're either committed to your customer or you're not. And yes, you need efficiency in the system, but not at the expense of relationships.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Well, listen, Warren, this has been fantastic. Thanks for the insights. All of Warren's information will be below the video. But before we go, please remind people about you and what you do, and your book, which I think was released in January, was it?
It was. It's a few months ago, and it's thankfully for anybody who's bought it out there, it's been doing well, and I appreciate that. Notes from the Brandstand. And my website is www.shareofheart.com. And I'm more than happy. I wish I could say I would answer everybody, but for your business folks out there, if they'd like to reach out, you can find me just by my name, Warren Kornblum, on LinkedIn as well. And the book is available, obviously it's Amazon. Thank you to Mr. Bezos. But also, barnesandnoble.com, basically wherever books are sold online.
Fantastic.
All around the world.
Sorry, go ahead.
All around the world. I said all around the world. Yeah.
Exactly. And beyond, maybe. Who knows? Well, listen, thanks so much, Warren. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.